Welcome to Citizen Impact, a project of the Miami Valley Full Employment Council. I'm your host, Logan Martinez. The singing that we began the show with was the Poor People's Campaign conference in Columbus a few weeks back. We're forming a chapter here in Dayton of the Poor People's Campaign. Some of you may have heard of it, but it grew out of Martin Luther King's March on Washington back in 1968. Poor People's March on Washington, and Reverend Barber from down in North Carolina and a bunch of people got together last summer and formed a nationwide group, the Poor People's Campaign. And we're starting a chapter here in Dayton, and the Full Employment Council and a number of other groups are coming together to help mobilize poor people and organize them here in the Dayton area. We have a great show for you tonight, the continuing saga of Wright State University. We have a bunch of the faculty members here to talk about the strike and the aftermath and what it means. Just a couple notes. Unemployment remained steady this last month. Around 6 million people are officially unemployed by the Labor Department, but the Labor Department also reports what we call hidden unemployment, which is about another 5 million people. That's people that are not actively looking for work. And then there's part-time workers who would like to have full-time employment. And that brings us up to about 15.7 million people nationwide and throughout Ohio who are unemployed or underemployed, or both. Good Sam, the struggle continues with Good Sam, working with community labor or community Clergy Coalition is doing a number of events in the community to try to pressure Premier Health to reopen or to set up a medical facility on that site. People need to continue to support that. And if you haven't heard, the KKK is coming to Dayton in May, and a number of groups are planning to protest them, the racist people coming to Dayton and the racist people here in Dayton. But let's talk about Wright State. We have several of the faculty members who were involved in the strike and are leaders of the AAUP out at Wright State. So if you could introduce yourselves, Gina, why don't you start?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Gina Oswald. I am a faculty member in the Department of Human Services, which is the College of Education and Human Services. I'm also the communication officer for AAUP WSU.
I'm Tom Rooney. I'm a professor of biological sciences in the College of Science and Math at Wright State. I'm also the union's treasurer, and I was a member of the negotiating team for the past 2 years.
Hi, my name is Geoff Owens. I'm in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Wright State University, which is in the College of Liberal Arts. I'm a professor, but I also serve as the AUP chapter vice president.
Well, welcome to Citizen Impact. We really appreciate you coming out and the inspiration. You know, for us who are pro-union, pro-worker, the Wright State strike was inspirational to the community where, you know, we've had so many incidents where, you know, people have lost their jobs, they've had strikes, and it's been a hard struggle here over the many years. And the faculty standing up out there for pretty much a pretty negative situation, we really was, for me, and I think for a lot of people, very inspirational. Tom, why don't you say a little bit about the strike, how it came to be, and just briefly lay out what happened a little bit during the strike.
Sure. Our union, the American Association of University Professors, has been negotiating a contract. We negotiate a 3-year contract. This one basically began in January of 2017, and the contract expired in June of 2017. And our contract negotiations for the first several weeks, about the first 2 months, were going sort of as expected. There was a lot of back and forth. And it was not an especially hard contract to negotiate because we knew that Wright State was having financial difficulties. There was not going to be any raises built into the contract. And so as we saw this as an opportunity to give up money in exchange for other things that were important to the union. So we were making some good progress up until about March or so, when the
last year
of 2017, so of two,
yeah. 2 years ago.
2 years ago, when suddenly the administration stopped. They withdrew entirely from negotiations and went radio silent. And those negotiations remained suspended until after our contract expired. And rather than handle the contract in-house, which is what they've always done, they've not used attorneys to negotiate the contract, nor have we. We've relied on faculty as our negotiators. They brought in a very high-paid attorney from Columbus, who ended up charging our university nearly $500,000 to negotiate the contract.
Or not negotiate.
Or not negotiate the contract, who basically stonewalled us up through, basically through last fall. We ended up going into fact-finding, which is a process mediated by the State Employment Relations Board. Our fact-finders report ended up giving a lot to the administration, gave very little to us. And each side gets to vote on it. However, each side needs a supermajority in order to reject the fact finder's report. You need a 60% margin. Our members rejected it with, I can't remember the exact numbers.
It was 478 to 12, if I recall
yes,
correctly.
it was overwhelming.
85% or 90%, right?
It was about 90%, actually higher.
Even 95%.
95%.
It was about 95%, but we had about 85% who actually voted.
Okay. So it was an overwhelming rejection. You know, we couldn't agree to the terms of the fact finder's solution, even though it would only be in place for a year and a half, and even though all their terms would sunset. There were too many things in that fact finder's report that were just utterly damaging to education at Wright State. It gave the administration the right to basically dismiss any and all faculty members and replace them with adjuncts or temporary faculty members. It gave got rid of our structure of step raises and our system of objective merit pay raises, and instead basically created a fiat system so that administrators could give money to whoever pleased them and penalize people who didn't. It ended up creating a large number of furlough days where faculty would be expected to work on their furlough days, they just wouldn't get paid. There was just all these pernicious things that are that we just couldn't live with, and so we as a union had a strike authorization vote in early January, and we voted 85 to 15% to go on strike. Our union had no history of a strike in its 21-year history. In fact, up until 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't even have any language in our Constitution as to how to vote for a strike or how a strike would even work, because we've always had good working relationships with our university. So we were really learning as we went. As you know, we were building the plane as we were flying, in a sense, trying to figure out how to organize a strike. And how to lead a strike all at the same time of basically trying to push back against things that were ultimately going to be damaging to our students in terms of things like increased class sizes, in terms of things such as requiring faculty to teach more courses with more students per class.
Without reducing service, research, anything like that.
Exactly. So, you know.
So they unilaterally imposed the contract, right?
They stopped negotiating. They unilaterally imposed a contract.
That was.
And our only option at that point was to strike in order to undo that contract.
So that they, you know, not only did they have these bad proposals, instead of like negotiating those bad proposals, they implemented them unilaterally.
That's right.
And basically pushed you out the door.
Yeah. And they imposed a contract worse than what the fact finder gave them.
Yeah, so effectively they rejected the fact finder's report after they had accepted the fact finder's report, because, for example, the fact finder saw no financial benefit to the university to extend non-tenure eligible faculty's contracts from 6 years to 12. Yeah. And so he said, we recommend you take that out, and they put it back in.
So they knew that was not going to fly. I mean, the administration knew that, the Board of Trustees knew that. So it wasn't, it was a conscious decision on their part to cause the strike.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really the community needs to hear because
Yeah, we were.
It isn't like you decided this because you over a few dollars. This was.
We've been very transparent, and we were very clear. You know, our last option is a strike, and we will strike if we have to.
Yeah, and we would only strike if they imposed. You know, we said that repeatedly going back to December of 2018.
So if they continued the previous contract, those work conditions,
as long as
you
we were
would have
sitting
continued to
Correct.
work.
Correct.
And now, as it turned out, you got most of the job particular, but you still got no raise of any kind, and your health care stepped down from being a good health care plan to being a so-so health care plan.
Right. And raises were never the issue. That was never anybody's number one issue, because we knew Wright State needed to get back on firm financial footing. And as faculty, we were all willing to go along and accept no raises for a number of years. So that wasn't an issue, and in fact, the strike was probably pretty unique in the sense that we were not striking over wages. We were striking fundamentally over student learning conditions and over job security.
And so I think it was like January 21st. Was the first day of the strike? It was, or
I believe it was January 22nd.
Yes.
but,
22nd.
Yeah, because the first was the holiday.
Okay, so you went out strike, and needless to say, it was a big thing for Dayton. That Wright State is one of the major institutions here for learning and for education, and a lot of us, tens of thousands, have gone to school there. And so the strike started. It was very cold, snowy winter. I mean, it was very bad time to start a strike. I mean, you didn't pick it for the sun. And I think the administration was counting on the weather being bad too. I mean, I think they thought this all out pretty consciously.
Well, they could have imposed in November. I mean, they could have imposed way back then, because Fact Finder was October 29th. So they waited until.
Yeah, in fact, I think we were a little bit surprised that they waited until about a week or so before classes began, because strategically, in fact, we had some sort of internal discussions. We thought, if they were really smart, they might do it, for example, just before Christmas, for example, in which case we would have to wait before we could really take any strike action until classes began again. And it would have probably hobbled our ability, our effectiveness. And so, in a sense, doing it a week before class began almost was a gift to us, in a sense. Not that we wanted to strike, but if we had to strike, that certainly created a timeline that advantaged us to a certain extent.
Well, I think there's a flip side of that too, that they also thought that this was the beginning of the semester and the pressure. And one of the, and we'll get into that, is the pressure of education. You're not producing cars, you're producing minds, and the pressure of the finite time of a semester. It was quarters when I went there, but the semester puts the burden at the beginning, and they kept extending the drop day, so that, like say, we're going to lose students, and
then end the strike.
We'll let you. In fact, we'll help lose students by extending. They could have just kept the drop date, and that would have been it. But they didn't want to do that.
Right. And also creating a term B, and they did many things that were not pro-student.
Okay. So did they do that during the strike? So they created
Yeah, they created a term B that would, in effect, cancel a bunch of the classes that we were teaching that weren't covered, and then it would start in a couple weeks, assuming that they could then fill those positions. But we had so many students who needed financial aid, they needed all of these things, they needed to be in class, and then they were expecting students to get all of their coursework within 7 weeks of this condensed.
Of course, there is such a thing as a B term. That is a pre-existing kind of a half semester scheduled for some special classes. But the thing was, of course, that a lot of students, they had work part-time, they had family obligations, et cetera, so they might only be able to be there Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or something.
They expect you to read like a book every day.
Yeah, so with the B term, typically, you'll be there Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday, continually taking classes because they're compressed into half a semester. And so what they cobbled together was this explanation that they were going to teach the courses as hybrids, which is a term we actually don't use here at Wright State University. I wrote the policy, so I know. But we don't have, and I guess what they were going to say is that you could still continue to show up on your Tuesday, Thursday schedule that you were used to back in January, and then somehow or another, whoever is teaching the course will have an online component or something along those lines where you don't actually have to physically show up on campus. At least that's my best guess.
So there was all kinds of maneuvering by the administration to undermine the strike. They did all kinds of stuff in the media where they put out all kinds of things that they knew were totally not true, that they were going to cover all the classes from the beginning. They had it all organized, and it was going to be a smooth transition to strike breakers and scabs.
That extended to the internal messaging as well. One of the things just immediately prior to the strike that caused a lot of panic among students is that there was some messaging saying that you must show up for classes whether or not there's an instructor there, or it might adversely affect your financial aid. And I know I was contacted by quite a number of students who were very upset that perhaps their financial aid was in jeopardy. Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge threat to make you cooperate.
Yeah, and so we were scouring through the federal financial websites, the iPads and other databases that talk about this, and there's no language in federal financial aid policy that even addresses a strike. What you do in that kind of situation, and typically, we don't even know who is showing up or not showing up for classes until the semester is over. Typically,
the strike. The first week and a half, 2 weeks was like just blazing, freezing weather and raining. I know that I went out there a couple times to walk the picket line, I didn't come on the rainy days, but I did come with an umbrella one day. But we're being Ohioans, we could sort of take the cold weather, and there was a lot of response from the students. I know that I was very impressed when the students marched out and joined the faculty, and so there was like active organizing by the students there. Then, there was this rally, and we have a video of the rally where I was surprised they allowed you to march onto the campus and march around the administration building.
So, it's like any other public place. We had to put in a demonstration request and had to get it approved, and it was approved. And during that time, we just moved our picket line.
Sure. So it's a very important point. It's a public institution, and so you're able to have free speech. It's the presence of faculty, students. You're allowed to express yourself there because there's an attempt at, I know at Sinclair, to restrict people's free speech, even though they have a freedom hall where they have the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and everything, but they really have a cramp down on what you're allowed to do there. But let's show this this rally. It's very impressive. It has a number, it has a couple speakers.
Please move on. This is not an action that is the brainchild of some small group of malcontents. This is grassroots from the faculty. This is our decision.
Yes.
We are the ones who have decided that this is necessary.
Yes.
So how did we get here? The last few weeks have been difficult. Striking is not something that any of us have done lightly. For many of us, we've devoted our entire careers to this institution. Not a 7-year term, not a short period as an administrator, our entire careers. This is my 20th year, I think. That's like right? We have a lifetime commitment here. It's because of that lifetime commitment that we are here. Our culture The culture of faculty, the culture that we instill in our university, is one of necessary confrontation. We believe in a diversity of ideas. Everyone gets to say what they believe to be the truth is, but we have processes by which we come to consensus about what the best ideas are. And we, as a group, as a community, follow that consensus until new information comes to light. We have decided as a community that the terms and conditions that were imposed by the Board of Trustees in the latest contract does long-lasting harm to our institution.
Yes. I know this one from high school. Some of you may know it. It's a call and response. I believe that. I believe that we will win. 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 Fight for right. 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 This is what a union looks like. Tell me what a union looks like. This is what a union looks like. Fight for right. Fight for right. Shout fight for right. Come on, you can do it. Fight for right. 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 I see you. I see you. You're running, Elise. Look at it.
Detroit.
Go away. Hey, hey. We will not go away.
I guess I didn't get the next
And I am like I'm singing. I don't know what you've been told.
I don't know what you've been told.
We stand united in the cold.
We stand united in the cold.
Breaking our union is a joke.
Breaking our union is a joke.
Fight the board that made us broke.
Fight the board that made us broke.
All right, everybody, we are here. Amazing. Happy to see you. We are AAUP, the Defenders of Higher Education. We are the full-time faculty. Yes.
Yeah.
We are the specialists, the experts in everything from musical theater to mental health counseling, from geriatric care to the history of Germany, from the robots to the rainforests. I want to do one special call out today to some of our professors. The group from the Department of Management. They are the experts on what's supposed to be happening around here, on the second and third floors of this building. There they are. And so, we see you. That management professors have walked out and discussed. That management are in the third week of a strike speaks volumes about what has been happening on this campus for 2 years. Yes. I asked them about it. They said, well, managers are required to plan for the future. We give this team an F. Shame! Shame! Shame!
There, it was a little warmer day there for that rally, but that was just about, I think about a week before finally the settlement ended the strike. But the whole notion of the Board of Trustees, now all these people were appointed by Kasich. The whole board, I think, because they're in for 9 years, and again, they pretty much were authoritarians about trying to break the union. I mean, they thought that they would. I mean, I don't know what they thought, whether that you were going to give in or give. You know, you did. You know, they did take a number of things that's unfortunate, and you lost a big chunk of pay being on strike for 3 weeks. But again, you were inspiration to working people and to the people in the Dayton community and to students. So now, like I said, it was about a week and a half after this that the strike came to an end, in which they gave up on a lot of the worst part of the working, conditions, but we're into staying on the health care, which is a big issue. I mean, we've had a number of strikes or near strikes. The bus drivers went on strike over health care. Everybody's been taking a big hit, big co-payments and deductibles and things they won't cover, and yet you're paying big premiums. So how do people feel in the aftermath of the strike,
Well, in a sense, we still very much feel the presence of the strike every day at work when we go in. It's not always the topic of conversation, but I think the people that were out on strike are still carrying that. A lot of the staff members who are not unionized and obviously did not strike, are still, processing having us back. One of our department accountant was, saying it was so good to have you guys back. You have no idea how bad it was having to sit here and not have you guys around.
Many responded, it was so lonely. It was so, we so missed you guys, which was nice to hear.
But we're starting to feel a lot of the pain now. We got our first paycheck in February, and so those deductions are starting to come out. So a lot of us have lost, our paychecks are $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 less, and that's going to continue for the next several months. And so we're all feeling it, and we know, sort of looking around, that people are tightening their belts and are, suddenly finding themselves beyond their means and outside their comfort zone in terms of the financial pressures they're under. They never expected to be in that kind of situation. When the strike started, it seemed that there were a relatively small number of issues that could be resolved relatively quickly. And in fact, it only did take 3 negotiating sessions to resolve all the issues, to come to an agreement. It took our Board of Trustees 3 weeks to meet over those 3 sessions. They stalled, they dragged it out, they refused to meet, they put in preconditions for meeting that were unreasonable, and really just dragged their heels, didn't have any interest in trying to end the strike. Some of the trustees went on vacation during the strike so they didn't have to deal with it, in spite of the fact that they were the decision makers deciding when the strike would end.
And so you're back at work. I know that there's that there's the faculty senate is working on a no confidence vote for, I guess, the administration and the Board of Trustees.
Right now it's just in the Board of Trustees, and that was started before even there was a strike authorization vote. So that's been sort of in play for several months now, and it's the faculty senate moves relatively slowly. So this is just sort of where it's starting to show up in their calendar. But this is something that was brought up last November and December before we even had a strike authorization.
I think it initially was brought up last April.
Yes, initially.
And it didn't go anywhere, so had to take a few different routes to make that happen.
Well, I think they've demonstrated why they need to go, and it's, like I said, it's authoritarianism, that both their mannerisms, and we saw this in Good Sam, the same kind of secret negotiations behind the scene, and nobody knew that it was coming. And now they want everybody's input what to do after they tear down the hospital, what to do with the land. They didn't want the input beforehand, only after they tear it down.
I beg to differ a little bit, because I think what it really what we saw during those 3 weeks of the strike was their vision of a corporate university. This is something, of course, that nationally people in academia and elsewhere have been talking about, how very often there have been these political drives in which they say that universities should be run more like businesses. And I think in those 3 weeks in January and February, we really got a taste of what that would actually look like, where, for example, the staff were effectively terrorized. You have to fill in for these missing faculty members or you will lose your job. The students were sort of terrorized as well, sort of used as human shields, that we can run a university and force students to attend classes. We don't need professors. They're just a burden and, an extra expense. And
no one was allowed to talk. Weren't they continually sent
Yes.
emails about, we have very specific spokespeople, you're
Yep.
not allowed to
You're not allowed. Yeah,
engage.
they deleted messages from social media. They told students that they might be threatened with violence if they approached faculty who were on the picket lines.
Violence?
Yeah.
Violence.
Yeah, like
Yes.
we were going to be violent.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
and
Oh,
again-
yeah, like,
Yeah. Union thugs.
Yep.
Right,
In fact, we even heard that the president and the provost had bodyguards.
yeah.
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 So I don't know what since we were out on the picket line, presumably she was afraid of her own students. But again, I'm only guessing because I wasn't there. But
well, the pressure really mounted there in the third week. I think being on the semester, you had tremendous PR. The community, I think in general, Dayton is a very pro-union, pro-worker community. You wouldn't necessarily know that because there's been a real undermining of that. Sinclair used to have a labor studies department, and but they totally did away with that. So there's not the kind of understanding of, and being professors, you could, I don't know if white collar workers, professional workers, but sort of part of what people's history that was made at Wright State is the broader,
There's been an absolute resurgence in teacher strikes across the country over the last 2 years. And at the risk of tooting our own horns, I think educators are really leading the new labor movement at this point, whether it's the teachers who are not unionized in West Virginia who all went out at risk of losing their jobs, the teachers in Oklahoma, the teachers in Denver, the teachers in Oakland. It's teachers right now that are, at the vanguard of leading the labor movement. And it's breathing some new life back into
they just had a big rally in Indiana
in the State
last
House,
weekend.
yes.
Yeah, you may have noticed that we don these red scarves, and actually this is a gesture of respect for the K through 12 teachers who have been fighting in this labor movement before we had to.
And I would just add to that, we're also a part of AFL-CIO, and we were so blessed to have not only the community come out and support us, but really have our labor brothers and sisters out on the line with us, supporting us, sending us food, walking with us, doing press conferences. We've had tremendous support from all around, which was very important.
It was important and it was educational because the professors at Wright State University got an education from the iron workers, from the electricians, from Ask Me, from the electrical workers, from the other unions throughout the Dayton and Miami Valley area. Those people came out and supported us, and that surprised us, or surprised a lot of our faculty members. They never sort of thought of themselves in terms of union solidarity, but they do now.
See, I think that's a message that we want to try to keep getting out there because we're all in this boat together.
And every one of those unions now has allies at Wright State University. Should they find themselves in times of trouble,
Absolutely.
our faculty will be out there with them.
Now, one time, I've been to a few of these things, the Teamsters were on strike here, and ZZ Top was playing at the Nutter Center.
Okay.
And, well, they delivered Miller Lite, and that was one of the sponsors of the concerts. So they had a demonstration outside of the Nutter Center to support the Teamster strikes, and they got a lot of good press out of that. And the next day, the day after, they settled the strike. So they've had events at Wright State over the years, but I remember that one. So I know that in some of the departments, there's repercussions for some of the department heads. They voted no confidence in a couple department heads because just they undermine the whole educational system and don't seem to be adjusting well to people being back to work.
Yeah, that's happened in my college, the College of Liberal Arts. There's been several departments that have had votes of no confidence against their department chairs, the associate dean and the dean of the college. And I know in our department, for example, we had some discussions while we were on the picket lines amongst ourselves about what we're going to do with our department chair. When we returned, she actually voluntarily said she would step down. And so it kind of diffused any lingering misgivings.
Now,
but not
usually,
everybody.
isn't the department head partly elected by the people in the department, or how's that work?
No, not really. It's an appointment by the dean
Administrators?
typically. Yeah. Although sometimes I think at least under our bylaws, they do solicit feedback from members of the department. You know, who they would feel most comfortable with. Of course, that doesn't obligate the dean to select the people that we prefer, but again, you know, there might be some feedback there. And again, we don't know what the impact of the votes of no confidence will be either, because again, it might embarrass them, or, you know, make them, maybe if they're close to retirement, maybe they might decide to take that step at that point. But otherwise, I guess they're under no obligation to abide by any vote of no confidence by the faculty. So, well, it's still kind of an unfolding situation. We don't really know how it's going to turn out.
Well, the struggle takes many forms. It doesn't just, you know, it hits a high point or a big confrontation, as they say, and then you go back to the day-to-day. We got one of the issues I know that really affected and affects you now is the change in the health care plan. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
I could probably talk a little bit about that. I was on the research team that was looking at healthcare at other universities that other faculty have, and you know, what we're getting in comparison. You know, the short thing is, you know, we know that healthcare goes up every year. Our premiums go up, our deductibles go up. What we're seeing right now for faculty is we're seeing, you know, our deductibles going up about 800% from one year to the next.
800%.
800%. Yeah, that's, you know, our premiums have gone up as well, but not nearly to that extent. Our out-of-pocket maximums have also gone up.
Well, I want to pursue this in two different ways. I want to pursue it in terms of the surplus that the university had several years ago. Over 100 million, is that close?
130.
$130 million, and how that was wasted or squandered in part in a number of investments and different things. You know enough about that to explain that, or I'm not sure there needs to be maybe some kind of investigation, white paper on it, but it's what I heard on the picket line was pretty amazing stuff.
Well, yeah, it's not that it all went to one place. You know, there were several different places it
Well,
went.
I would hope so.
Fortunately, no good places.
Yeah, no good places. You know, there were buildings that were built that were not funded. That, you know, some of the money came from that. I remember at the time asking, you know, what's the source of the funds for these new buildings going up, and I was told by the president at the time, oh, it's coming from legacy donations. And of course, I had to go back and look up what is a legacy donation. It's a donation that hasn't happened yet because someone hasn't died and willed their money to the university. So they were they were spending money that they were counting on that they didn't have. So that's where some of the money was coming from. Other money was going in the real estate buildings off campus. So, you know, I think one of the most infamous ones is the Wright Credit Union building. That our chairman of our board of trustees, Doug Frecker of Wright Credit Union, sold over to Wright State University at an inflated price, which sits largely empty. We have our human resources was moved over there on the second floor. Now our human resources wing of that building is empty on campus. There were investments in building a research institute, a Wright State Research Institute, and the Wright State Applied Research Corporation as a way of being nimble and flexible and getting around university regulations, and that's been a money loser for us as well. So money's been going out, all kinds of different directions. And, we were also trying to build up for increasing enrollment beginning in the early 2010s. Our provost at the time was anticipating students, 25, 30,000 students at Wright State University.
So how many students are there now?
About 15,000.
About 15,000. So they had this money, and how much surplus do they have now?
6. What do they? It changes. Every time we get an email, it changes.
Yeah.
So that's a really fair question, but...
There's a new financial statement that's not been released yet, and I think we have about 17 million right now.
Okay.
But I need to double check that.
So, but the point being is they had this money, and instead of putting that into education and the students and the faculty,
they went into everything but.
And now you guys are biting the bullet here on healthcare, and it's happening to people all over the place. Where, and the other angle I don't know if you're familiar with Medicare for All or the single payer health care plan. The Congress a week and a half ago introduced Medicare for All, which is a single payer health care plan with 106 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. And our group, the Full Employment Council, has been a big supporter of that. But they're fighting that tooth and nail. They don't want to have people that would take health care and solve it for everybody, literally.
Won't you please think of the shareholders? They're getting the short end of the stick here.
Well, they've certainly made it, and it's not even the shareholders, it's the executives of these hospitals and pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies. I mean, they're paying them, the insurance companies, the executives are $100 million, something like that, in that, the stock auctions and pay and bonuses. And what do you do with that kind of money? You don't give it to the faculty, do you?
No.
Well, like I said, the part of the legacy is the labor movement here. And part of it's the professors. I know you had support from professors from all over Ohio and all over the country.
And it was amazing. I mean, we were getting food delivered from Rutgers. We were having people come down from Kent to walk the line. It was amazing to see. And if they need it, we'll be there for them too.
Right. It's clearly people are either we got to circle the wagons and stick together here, or they're going to overrun us. We've got a little bit of time here to theorize about, like, you have these next year and the year after that on this contract. We'd like to work with the union there on a number of projects like Medicare for All. But what kind of stuff, now that you've adjusted, you had the students, there was some sort of activism among the students there. How do you have sense where people are at now, as far as, there are students who are on both sides of this. So what kind of response are you getting from that kind of, people that support you and those who are kind of questioning?
Well, I think that we were just absolutely overwhelmed with the student support, and the student activism. I mean, you had footage just, of what was going on at University Hall. While we were marching around University Hall, there were students actually doing a silent sit-in in University Hall. And actually, we heard about it, but we weren't really directly involved. But, it was clear that a lot of students really cared about the university and cared about their faculty to the extent that they actually took considerable risks to do actions that were very supportive.
Oh yeah, that was on. They had tape on their mouth. I don't know. I don't know. That was like they're being censored.
Silenced.
Yeah. What about the other side? What about students that were not supportive? Have you had much interaction or?
I haven't heard from students who weren't supportive. I've just had emails and communications. I missed you. Thanks for coming back. It's so great to have you. So I'm sure there are some students that weren't supportive, but they haven't been. They've just been happy to have advising again and to have their teachers and to be able to talk about honors projects and to be able to talk about study abroad and all of those things that all went away when we weren't there.
Now, I think it was the second longest, well, the longest faculty strike for faculty unions in Ohio, and nationwide the second longest. Now I was remembering, well, after Kent State, they closed about 200 universities, and in Columbia University, during '68, they pretty much shut that down too for a massive strike and police attack. But what do we look, the Board of Trustees seems to be indicative of where the corporate mindset is. And they look like they were going to go after I know, I think the Kent State contract is coming up.
Yep.
And the guy who's the lawyer has been placed on Toledo.
He's a trustee at Toledo now, yes.
So they intend to, they haven't given up either, have they?
No.
Yeah.
Nope, but just need to stay with solidarity and hold the line.
Yep. And hopefully we can bring some of the lessons that we learned to Kent State and other institutions that are going to be going through collective bargaining in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, and hopefully they do. As Tom mentioned earlier, we had to create everything as we went. I mean, there were no strike facts that existed. There was no information about how to deal with technology or how to deal with students, and we had to create all of those things as we were going through it. So hopefully, if other faculty do find themselves in that situation, that they do contact us, because, not that ours is the best it could be, but it's a starting point instead of starting from scratch.
We had things that worked very well for us. We had a system of department liaisons. So for every 8 members of our union, we had 1 person assigned to them. Those liaisons would meet weekly, prepare for the strike, and they would talk to those people one-on-one and say, like, what are your big concerns? What are your big fears? And so we basically had outstanding data on every single one of our members in terms of what was important to them. And so as someone who was at the negotiating table, arguing for our faculty members, I didn't have to guess. We knew exactly sort of where people stood, what was important to them. And that was incredibly powerful, because when we had our strike vote, we saw it didn't surprise us that it went 85 to 15%. But when we had our actual strike, I know even I was surprised getting there on the first day of the strike and seeing strike headquarters completely flooded with people. Everybody was there. Everybody was ready to go. And I think that was based in part on the fact of having those one-to-one conversations that went on for several months leading up to the strike.
Well, and when people showed up to HQ, they were scared. I mean, we just walked off of our job, but they saw everybody, and we really became such a tight-knit community. I mean, talking to people, and they were talking about, I never knew any of these people because we all work in silos, but now we're all family, and now we're all together, and now we're looking for opportunities to continue to see all of our people, because, for 3 weeks we saw all of our friends for every day, and we had that huge emotional support.
For warmth,
we huddled together for warmth. We cried together. We, got mad together. We ate together. We ate a lot together, and so it was a true community. And to have all of that, and then to go back across the street and not have that was difficult. But
Well,
we're
you
finding
did-
ways to keep doing
You're
that.
carrying it, and like I said, for the Dayton community in particular, it was inspirational that working people and the community saw that you took a stand, and
And they took a stand with us.
Yep.
We
Yeah.
had people from the community every day.
absolutely, and that I think for the future, for the other other faculty and universities and other workers, that solidarity transfers over. It builds people's consciousness. It builds their confidence, and we're really thankful for your sacrifice in doing that.
Well, our union has become a lot stronger because of it. And we're currently having union elections right now for new officers. I'm expecting record turnout in terms of voting, and we have some outstanding, strong candidates who were forged in the strike who are getting ready to serve in leadership positions.
Well, we really appreciate it, and like to continue to work with you in the future and pave the way. Now, we got a few minutes here, but we're going to kind of wrap things up. The Full Employment Council has been involved. This is our 30th year of doing a TV show here at DATV and at the Miami Valley Cable Council, which is the other. We're going to wrap it up now, Teeks, so tell them that we're going to go fast. We have a lot of stuff coming up. The Poor People's Campaign is organizing here. There is a, protest against the Klan coming here. We still, need a lot of outreach on these issues, from Medicare to bringing peace to domestically and foreignly. We've been at war now for 17 and a half years, and we have to find a path to peace, and all this is sort of works together, and solidarity and unity is contagious. We have Tiki Kai Krismana, who's worked with us since the beginning of our show 30 years ago, and is doing floor director and is a co-producer, and we want to thank her tonight. Special recognition. Yeah, come on over here, Teeks. There she is. She's behind the camera most of the time. We have to twist her arms to get her in front, but she's been with us 30 years of TV here at DATV and Citizen Impact. So thank you, Tiki. All power to the people. There she goes. So thanks again to the faculty at Wright State, and hang in there and mold those minds, and not mold them, but bring
Nurture
them along.
those minds,
Nurture
yeah.
those minds, and keep up the struggle.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we're going to go out with the song we started with, if you're ready to run it there. This is the Poor People's Campaign in Columbus.